What's up, students? Welcome to another primary source walkthrough. This time, we're going to be diving into Alexander Stevens' Cornerstone address. We actually don't have the full thing in front of us here. Instead, what we have is a selection where he addresses the cornerstone of the Confederate government. Hence why this is called the Cornerstone Address. So let's set this up a little bit here. Alexander Stevens was prior to the Civil War. He was a congressman. Where he was from, let me look that up really quick. Because I am unsure where he was from. He was from Georgia. Of course, he was from Georgia. That makes complete sense to me. Okay, so he, after Georgia secedes and the Confederate States of America is formed, he becomes the vice president. He gives this speech in March of 1861, really close to the foundation of the Confederacy. Keep in mind that a lot of the secession from the United States on the part of the southern states happened in the winter of 1860 to 1861, after the election of 1860, but before Lincoln could take office, and that's something to take note of. As these states are leaving one by one, the president of the United States before Lincoln, Buchanan, does nothing to stop it. And many historians consider James Buchanan, to be the worst president in United States history. That's a whole nother story. In any case, what Stevens is doing here is he is outlining precisely what the Confederate States of America is all about. And they have come up with their own constitution, and apparently he gave this extemporaneously, which means he just kind of gave it as it went, which is fascinating. I used to compete in extemporaneous speech, and as racist as this thing is, I don't think I could have done this off the top of my head. Yeah, that's something. In any case, so that's the context in which this speech is given. He's going to say some racist stuff here. So let's dig in and find out what the cornerstone of the Confederacy was. He gets right to it in this segment. And when he says the new Constitution, what he's talking about is he is talking about the Confederate Constitution. And he says the Confederate Constitution has put to rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution of African slavery as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. So he's saying that our Constitution, meaning the Confederate Constitution, has slavery in its proper place. Now, if you remember back to the United States Constitution and its framing, the founders, to say the least, were not completely comfortable with slavery appearing in the Constitution. And that is borne out by them not actually using the word slavery or slave in the Constitution as it was originally written. Slavery is in there. We talked about this a little bit, but they don't use those words, slave or slavery. We know that some of the founding fathers were uncomfortable with the idea of slavery, or had become uncomfortable with it. Jefferson is one of these. We also know that there was a provision in the Constitution that said, well, we can outlaw the international slave trade, the very first of 1808, which they do. Now, Stevens is going to take us back to that moment. And he lays it out for us here that the founding fathers, were indeed split on African slavery. And he points out it was an evil that they knew not well how to deal with, but generally it would just eventually go away on its own. And from the vantage point of 1787, remember this is before the advent of the cotton gin and the expansion of cotton farming, and therefore the expansion of slavery. That's pretty much how it was. People thought that it was just going to eventually die out. That's not what happened. And he points out that the fathers were fundamentally wrong, he says. And he gets right into his racist shit right away. He says that the assumptions about slavery that the fathers made were an error because they rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. And he says there is no equality of races. And he gets right to it. He says our new government, the Confederate government, is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. I don't think it gets much more racist than that, ladies and gentlemen. It's bald-faced white supremacy. So he is saying the Confederate States of America is a white supremacist ethno-state. Okay? White people are in charge. White people are better. White people have dominion over black people. That is what he is saying. And he says about the people in the North who say otherwise, they are fanatics, they are beyond reason, and, they're just dumb, is what he's saying. He says down here, they, people in the North, assume that the Negro is equal and hence conclude that he is entitled to equal privileges and rights with the white man. And he says, look, if that premise was correct, that they are equal, they deserve equal rights. But he says that premise is incorrect. Right up here. He continues on to say that, well, it wasn't the Confederate States of America who made things this way. It was God who made things this way. Which, that's interesting. Well, I'm obviously I'm saying that that's bullshit, and you should think that that is bullshit too. I would think, and unless you're a white supremacist, and then what's wrong with you? Besides everything. Anyway, what he's getting at here is he is calling back to, remember last week when we read James Henry Hammond and we read George Fitzhugh and we talked a little bit about that biblical justification for slavery. That's what he's referring to here. And he's saying that since there is biblical support for the institution of slavery, that it obeys natural law, which is what he's getting at here. And natural law isn't science, even though it's talked about in the 19th century and before as science, because it used to be back in the ancient and medieval worlds and the early modern world too. Before we have these hard science disciplines like biology, chemistry, physics, etc. A lot of the hard science, what we call hard sciences now, was the domain, let's say, of philosophy. It was all a part of the philosophical experiment. So, you can say that somebody like Aristotle was the first Western scientist. And a lot of what we do in the sciences is based on a Aristotelian, that is coming from Aristotle, mode of epistemology. That is how we know things. It's the study of how we know things. Epistem, it has to do with knowledge, so it's the study of knowledge and how we come to know things. So anyway, what he's saying here is, he's not, when he says natural law, it's not like physics or chemistry or anything like that. It's just this way of understanding how the world works, which was how people in the 19th century would have talked about things that they observe in the world, which is what science is all about. In any case, now, he continues, and he says that, look, slavery and the subordination of black people to white people is as natural as other things that we are so used to accepting. He says it's as true as Galileo and his principles. It says the sun is at the center of the solar system, or Adam Smith and the political economy, and Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, Capitalism, etc. Harvey circulation of the blood. Okay, so there's that appeal to science again. And he's saying that, like, look, this is a part of just the natural order of things. And he says that the Confederate States of America are the first to ever conform to this. That there's been slavery, but it's always been different. And the way he differentiates is he says, look, if we look at other examples, and he doesn't say this, but I can imagine him thinking it, if we look at ancient Greece or ancient Rome, or we look at the medieval world and the complex system of bonds and oaths that we call feudalism, it's never one race enslaving another race. It's the one race enslaving itself, etc., etc., etc. And, like all of the early Western civilizations that we study in world history, like the Greeks, the Romans, various Europeans, all of them have slavery, and they enslave people of their own ethnicities. And he's saying, well, we don't do that. We don't enslave white people. We enslave black people. And that is what is natural. And we're the first ones to ever do that. And again, he goes to the Bible here. He says subordination is his place, the black person's place. The black person by nature, or by the curse against Canaan, which last week we looked at Hammond, and he said the doom of Ham. The curse against Canaan is the same thing. So that's the Noah's son, Ham, who is supposedly the patriarch of the Canaanites that Israel eventually destroys, sees his father drunk or whatever, and gets in trouble for it, etc. And that is apparently the justification for slavery, according to Stevens. So he goes on and says, well, it's not our place to question God making it this way, even though I think it's hard for us in 2020 to buy into the literalism of that story, though he seems to be doing it here. He wraps up by, mentioning one more time just how important slavery is, and he ends by saying the African race, black people, will never be civilized. He doesn't think that that's possible, but at the very least, if that's even remotely possible, the best thing that we could do is teach them how to work, feed, and clothe themselves, which is what slavery apparently does. Obviously it doesn't, but that's how slave owners and advocates of slavery justified it to themselves, which is something you should be thinking through. In any case, that's a pretty good walkthrough, I think, of Stephen's address. It kind of gets at the core assumptions of what he's doing. And ultimately, I mean, it tells you what exactly the Confederacy was all about. I mean, it was not about states' rights. I mean, anywhere in this does he say that the cornerstone of the Confederacy is the rights of states? No. He says that the cornerstone of the Confederate government is slavery and white supremacy. He says it bald-facedly. So, think about that when people are making arguments about the importance of states' rights to the Confederate cause, because the primary sources just don't bear it out. It just doesn't. And other things that you're going to read this week as a part of the class will help you understand that too. In any case, if you have any questions about Alexander Stevens, the Cornerstone address, or some of the arguments made here, feel free to reach out to me in an email. I'd be happy to take your questions during an office hours conversation as well. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have yourselves a good week. And I will see you on the next one.